Hey everyone, so for my scientific presentation, I will be looking at air pollution and how it affects us and the body around the world around us, not only the environment, but ourselves in general, because there obviously are a lot of negatives to it. So, how does air pollution happen and how does it spread? So, according to the World Health Organization, they track viruses and the effects on our health. They became popular in COVID, which I'm sure a lot of us remember that because it was crazy. Air pollution starts from household combustion devices like motor vehicles. And so, like when we're talking about motor vehicles, we think of big tr pickup trucks and cars. Now, obviously, they carry a lot of fuel and particles with them. So, obviously, that's all can lead to pollution if it's used in a negative way. Forest fires and industrial factors are also sources of how air pollution can spread. Industrial factors are like big factors that have lots of smoke that come from them, and they're obviously very bad for the environment if it spreads. And forest fires obviously spread very quickly, which we're going to talk about later with the LA wildfires, which was a big covered event this past month. The World Health Organization also states that 99% of our population breathes high levels of polluted air because we can't always tell what kind of air we are breathing. So that essentially, if you're just walking around outside and you smell something weird, that can be polluted air and you wouldn't even know it and it gets in your system and can cause damage. So it's always important to keep that in mind. Also, brush fires that start somewhere can spread quickly and that smoke can be bad. Obviously, any fire smoke, cigarettes, anything, what have you, can be bad. So that is how air pollution happens and how it spreads. Moving on. So I think it's important to cover big popular air polluted events, for example, the recent LA wildfires. So, according to Brandon Boswell, a journalist at CoStar News, which is an independent journalism company in Southern California, they reported that 11,200 properties were destroyed when the fires ripped through the Los Angeles area, particularly in Malibu, the Palisades, and Southern California. The fires created lots of ash and put tons of smoke in the air, making it unbearable to breathe. You saw people walking around with masks and just fleeing for their lives. So that's why the evacuation orders were so important. According to Kat Curlin at the University of California Davis News and Media Relations, she's a reporter there. She conducted her own research from the ash left on burnt cars and property. I thought the burnt cars experiment was very interesting because, as we already talked about, cars already carry a lot of fuel and particles with them. So just adding fire to it that can blow up is just going to make it 100 times more worse for the air. It, the research showed that in Southern California, the air was contained with chlorine and lead particles. Those are ashy particles that are like fire, flames that can get in the lungs and essentially just burn you up, and that's not a good thing at all. So that's so here we have a chart. You see, this was during when the fire started around here. So the air mass is still pretty okay, but as it in the aftermath of it, like this is now, it's shot up because the air, just because the fires are contained, doesn't mean the air is good enough to breathe in. So people in California really have to keep that in mind as they're going about their daily lives because there's still a lot of ash and smoke in the air that can cause damage. So this was a pretty good chart that I thought was interesting. Another big event that I'm sure a lot of people that live in our area remember is the Canada fire smoke pollution in the United States. So essentially, in the summer of 2023, some of America became under siege from the Canadian wildfire smoke that swept into the region due to gusty winds pushing it that way. Philadelphia happened to be at the center of this when it happened. According to Tammy Souza, who's a meteorologist at CBS News Philadelphia, the air quality reached the highest level on the air quality index scale. It was between 425 and 500. We have the scale down here. Here you see the peak 426 and the lowest was 89. Essentially, this whole week was just covered in smoke. I remember going outside, it was pretty just unbearable to be out. You would just start coughing immediately. But anything in this air mass is not good to even be out in. So, and just because the wildfires are burning in Canada and that was 100 miles away, the smoke is spread so fast because that's how much the winds can push smoke and generate it into the United States just like that. So that was a pretty significant event, something that we don't see a lot. There are long-term effects of air pollution that we should keep in mind. Many people can get lung damage and breathing problems from air pollution, like we already talked about. According to Becky Upham, who is an author in health and wellness, She stated in her own research that she conducted, air pollution is acknowledged as a major threat to health. Scientists estimate that it causes more than 6.5 million deaths each year globally, a number that's climbed over the last 20 years. Air pollution has been linked to cancer, heart disease, respiratory diseases like asthma, diabetes, obesity, immune dysfunction, and neurological issues. So essentially, in her research study, she took people that have been victims from polluted air, like wildfires was the biggest one. And she essentially saw what kind of respiratory issues they got from that, and these are what she came up with. Another thing to keep in mind is that pollution can also be bad for animals and force them to leave their homes in the forest. So essentially, if you see a big wildfire coming, the animals have to flee themselves if they can, and they might go to a climate that's not good for them, but it's the only place they could go where they would feel safe, but it could also kill them in the end because they're not used to that climate. And drinking water is another factor to keep in mind with this because essentially, if the particles and ash get into the water, it's going to be bad to drink. So we don't want any of that. So all these are things are to consider when we're talking about air pollution. What can be done to prevent pollution? So one thing that we can do, we don't want to litter and we want to always pick up after ourselves. Leaving things out can help burn easily, and that's never good. Avoid burning things in close to large areas of woods that can burn easily, like paper, wood, stuff like that. Recycle so we can reuse things more easily. You don't want to keep your car engines on for a long period of time. We talked about that earlier because it leads a lot of particles out. Open your windows in your house to reduce circulation from the air condition and heat. Obviously, those are all generated by fuel, so the more we cut down that, the better it is for the air. And if we can switch over to solar and wind power, because that's also renewable energy, not constantly relying on fuel and gasoline to product our needs. And here are my reference pages. Thank you all for listening. I hope you learned more on pollution air. Thank you.